Hello, everybody, and welcome to Study Skills Part 6. In this video, I'm going to be answering your questions that you posted to the Google Classroom last week. I asked you to share questions you have about studying for your GED math test. So I collected all of the questions and we've got them on the screen here. I'm going to go through each of them, give you my thoughts and suggestions, and we also point you to where you can find some more information. Let's get started with the first one here. It says, when is the best time to take the GED? So this question could have a few meanings. You could be asking like, what time of day is the best time? Or maybe you're asking like, when am I ready to go take the GED test? So I'll answer both of those. In terms of what time of day is the best time, it really just depends on you, your schedule, whether you're a morning person, an afternoon person, an evening person. Just think about what time of the day you are at your best, at your most awake and feeling great. And also what time of day you will definitely be able to make your appointment, because you don't want to miss your test appointment unless there is some kind of emergency. Now, in terms of when's the best time to take the GED in general, like when am I ready to take the test? You will know that you're ready to take the test when you have passed your GED Ready test. So in Kentucky, you are required to pass the GED Ready test in a subject before you go and take the GED test for that subject. The GED Ready tests are exactly like the real GED test, except they're about half the length. So you get a chance to practice when you take the GED Ready test, and you'll get a score that tells you whether you are likely to pass or not. In terms of taking the GED Ready test, I would say that you should try a practice test if you want to. You are able to try the GED Ready test absolutely anytime. If you are unsure about whether or not you want to, then you should talk with me about it. If you are interested in taking it, let me know and I can get you set up on the test. Certainly nothing bad can happen if you try the GED Ready test. It just tells you how prepared you are for the actual GED, and it gives you some pointers on things you can study to help you be prepared. All right, next question here. How long do I have to study math before I take my test? Great question. And the answer is it totally depends. So it depends on what tests you've already taken, and it depends on where your scores were at for those tests. Like I said, you actually can take your GED Ready test anytime. There's no limit on who can take it and who can't take it. But in general, I have ideas about who will likely do well on the test and who needs a little bit more studying before they take the test. So for some people, they need to do lots of practice and review with math before they go take the test. For other people, that stuff is fresh in their mind and they're able to go take the test right away. It really just depends on the person. So how long do I have to study math before I take my test? The real answer would be, how much time can you put into studying each week? Because if you are able to devote a little bit of time to studying each day, then you will be able to make fast progress. You will be able to learn the material you need to learn, and you'll be prepared to go take the test sooner than if you just work on math once a week, or if you just come to class but you don't do any homework. So if you are wondering about whether or not you're ready to take your math test, you should ask me. Let me know. I do my best to keep track of where everyone is at with their testing and who needs to do what. But of course, sometimes things get out of control. So if you have questions, please let me know. All right, how much reading is on the GED test? This is a great question. So On the reasoning through language arts, the science, and the social studies tests, so those 3 subjects, there was a lot of reading. They're basically reading tests. That's the main skill that you're being tested on, your ability to read and understand information. On the math test, I would say there is also quite a bit of reading because the GED focuses on applied math. So they focus on word problems. So a lot of word problems, a lot of graphs and charts, that kind of thing. It's unlikely you're going to see a problem like 1 + 4 = what? It's more likely that you'd see a problem like Jill has 1 apple and Janae has 4 apples. Altogether, how many apples do they have? Right? So on the math test, you need to be able to read problems, and you need to be able to recognize that they are similar to problems that you have already practiced. That is a huge key to doing well on standardized tests like the GED test. It's really about recognizing patterns and applying skills that you've already practiced to things that show up on the test. Because of course, you're not going to see exactly the same problems that you've done when you go take the test. There are going to be different problems. But what you want is that you have done like 200 different fraction word problems, right? You've done so many fraction word problems, you've practiced so many of them, so that now when you come to a new one, you're like, oh, this fraction word problem is really similar to this other one I did that I remember. I know what I need to do. So there is reading on the math test. There's reading in terms of word problems. And so you need to be on the lookout for being able to recognize similar problems and also be on the lookout for key words that can give you hints about what you're supposed to do. All right, next question here in yellow says, can you take 1 test at a time? The answer to that is yes, absolutely. In fact, you're really supposed to take 1 test at a time. If you were to sit down and try and take all 4 subjects in one day, it would be like 8 hours of testing, and almost nobody wants to do that. So yes, you can and most likely should take 1 test at a time. So if you take your social studies ready test and you pass it, you can go ahead and you can schedule your social studies GED test. You can take that test and be done with it while you continue to work on your other subjects. When can I take a practice test? So we already talked about that, but again, the answer is as soon as you feel ready to take it, as soon as you are interested in taking it, we can get you set up to try a practice test. So you should get in touch with me if you would like to take a GED ready test. How long does it take to pass the GED? So this is kind of a similar question to how long do I have to study math before I take my test? The answer is it really depends on the person. There is no specific time limit or time requirement. It's more about how much time can you put in to studying, doing homework, and being an effective student. So some people, they've got all the material fresh in their mind, so they're able to just go ahead and take the test and be done. For other folks, they need to spend some time reviewing, refreshing, relearning some of the material. And again, it's just a totally individual thing. I would say, going back to our study skills video on SMART goals, that it is a really good idea for you to set yourself a time goal. So if it is your goal to have your GED, I would highly recommend making a decision about when you are going to have your GED finished by. So it could be, I want to have my GED done by my next birthday, or I want to have my GED done by January 1st, or I want to have my GED done by graduation in May. And your goal should be realistic. So of course, you may want to have your GED done now, right? Like by tomorrow, but that might not be realistic. You want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. So thinking about how much time you might reasonably need to study all of the material that you need to study in order to pass the test. Again, if you're having a little trouble with setting a reasonable time goal, get in touch with me, get in touch with your other instructors if you have them, and we can chat about setting a realistic deadline for you. All right, when is a good time to study? So I think the person who asked this was specifically thinking about when you have kids at home who are doing distance learning as well. And now I know that is a very difficult situation to be in, or even if you don't have kids at home, but maybe you've just got a lot of other people in your house, it can be hard to find quiet time, quiet, uninterrupted time to study. My best advice is just to find short periods of time when you can, especially if you have kids at home. Don't feel like you need to sit down and study for 2 hours when you study. That's not how it has to be. If you can grab 5 minutes to redo a problem that you did last week, if you can take 15 minutes to try one homework problem, that's great. If you can take 5 minutes to review your notes from last class, that's great. If you can take 2 minutes to send me a question that you remembered you had. Any little bit of time makes a difference. In fact, short periods of time spread throughout the day, doing that every day, is for many people a lot more effective than trying to find long chunks of time to do work. So my biggest piece of advice for when is a good time to study, the good time to study is the time that you have. So making use of those little chunks of time that you have throughout the day. All right, and then I'm gonna tackle this one next before we get to the like how do I study questions. So someone asked, can the GED help me find a better job? So probably is the answer. Of course, it's different for everyone, but having a GED or having some sort of high school credential can really only help if you are looking to find a better job. It also is very helpful if you are planning to go on to take college classes or get some kind of professional certification or license. Most of those things require some kind of high school credential or GED. So the GED can absolutely help you find a better job. If you have questions about job search related things, get in touch with me and I will help you out. We also have a person at our location who you may have spoken to, who also, she is there to help folks with career prep and job searches, things like that. But yeah, the GED is just one more thing that you can put on your resume, put on your application that says, hey, you know, I have this. It shows that I have the basic skills that I need to perform well at this job. All right. Now I wanted to talk about this question here, which is not a question, but a statement. Math is my worst subject. So that's fine. I think that's true for a lot of people where they find math to be really difficult. They feel like they're not good at math. To that I say, no big deal. You're going to work on it. The only way that you get better at something is by believing that you can get better at something. So instead of saying math is my worst subject, I would start practicing saying something else to yourself. So I would, anytime you start feeling that way, like, oh, I'm bad at math, I can't do this, math is terrible, I would practice replacing that with something like, this is difficult, but I'm going to figure it out. Or this is difficult, but I'm going to get help from my teacher. Right? So it's okay to recognize that something is difficult or that you don't like it. but you also have to recognize that you have the ability to figure it out. I know this is something that Miss Alex talks about a lot with her students, but she talks about growth mindset. So that's an example of having a growth mindset where instead of just telling yourself what you are, you tell yourself that you can change. So you recognize that you can change, you recognize that you can grow, that you can acquire new skills, that you can learn things. So maybe in the future, maybe I'll do a study skills video about having growth mindset, because growth mindset is incredibly important for just about any area of life. It's really hard to get better at something if you believe that you're bad at it. And so kind of retraining your brain to talk to you differently makes a huge difference in lots of education research that's been done. People's attitudes towards themselves and how they talk to themselves is a huge impact on how successful they are, in classes, how successful they are in learning new skills. You also have to recognize that math is a skill like anything else. So, I am not particularly good at tennis. If I go and I just like play tennis right now, I like can't hit the ball. I'm like slow. I have bad aim. All of those things are true. But I know that if I was to play tennis every day, and if I had a person to teach me, to give me tips for how I can improve, if I focused on, strengthening and improving my endurance, all of those things, I know that I would get better at it. So that's having a growth mindset. It's believing you can improve. So it's okay if you don't like math, but you have to believe that you can get better at it by practicing, by putting in the time, by doing the work. Okay. That's my sermon about growth mindset. Like I said, I think I will do another study skills video all about growth mindset, because it is so important when it comes to being a successful student in anything. All right, what else should I study? Now, this is a good question. If you have been in class for a while, you feel like you've covered a lot of different topics, it could be that the answer is nothing else. It could be that you should stop studying and you should just go take your practice test and see how it goes. Another way to get a good idea of what you need to work on is by looking at the GED study guides. So let's take a look at where those are. In my previous study skills video, so I think study skills part 5, I talked about the study guides available for each subject. So here I am on GED.com. I logged in. So if you're a student logging into GED.com, this is what it'll look like. Now let's say I want to know, like, what do I still need to work on for math? So you can go into math, scroll down, and here you have the GED Math Study Guide. Each of these little squares here opens up a slideshow where it goes over the main skills that you need to do well on the test, broken down by topic. So let's go into basic math. Let's go back to the beginning. Okay, not the beginning, but anyway, if you had just opened this up, what it does is it takes you through 10 skills that are important for basic math. It tells you, so for example, skill 8, it says unit rates. You need to be able to find unit rates. So for example, that means finding miles per hour or dollars per pound. And then they have an example question here. A store charges $6.96 for a case of mineral water. Each case contains 2 boxes of mineral water, and each box contains 4 bottles of mineral water. What is the cost of each bottle of mineral water? And then they show you the answer here. The answer is A. Now, what you could do to figure out what you still need to work on is you could go through each of these skills and you could see, do I know what this is? Can I answer this question? If you can't answer this question, if you look at it and you're like, I have no idea, then you'd be like, okay, I need to work on unit rates. Let me ask Ms. Morgan for more practice with unit rates. And then I could go on to the next skill. And it says objects at scale. Use scale factors to convert dimensions, blah, 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 blah. We get the question down here. You look at this, you try the question. If you don't know what it is, then you need to work on it. So that is one way. This is kind of like a checklist you can go through to see what you need to work on. Another way that you can figure out what you need to work on is by going over your notes, going over what you've done so far, thinking about what was difficult for you and what was easy, and maybe you want to get some more practice with the things that were difficult for you before you go take your test. And then if you do those two things and you're still not really sure, then talk to me. So ask me just on a one-on-one basis. We'll go over your stuff together and we'll make a study plan. All right, how can I remember the math I learn for when I take my test? Now this is very important and also a huge question. So every person is a little different, right? So what works for one person is not going to work for everybody else. I would highly recommend taking a look at the study skills video I made on learning and remembering new material. So here's my YouTube channel, and I can go to the study skills playlist. Oops, that's not what I want. So all of those videos are here. You can see here, study skills part 3 is remember what you learn. So this is a video I made about how to remember the things that you learn. So I would definitely check out that video. But some of the most important thing, again, you want to think of math as a skill that you need to practice. You could think of it like learning a new language. If you were trying to learn Spanish or any other new language, you would need to practice it every day in order to get good at it, right? If you just try and like spend 20 minutes on Spanish once a week, it's going to take you a long time to make progress. So the more time you can spend on your studies, the more it'll help you remember what you learn. It'll help you build on your skills. Another thing I will say is when you are studying, I feel like a lot of people when they're studying, what they do is they just sit down and like read. They just read over notes, they read over packets that they have. That's okay, but for most people, it's not going to be very effective at helping you remembering things. The best way to remember something is to actually do it. So if you are like, oh, I'm having a really hard time remembering how to add fractions, what you need to do is you need to sit down and you need to do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 practice problems where you are adding fractions. And then next week, you need to do that again. So lots of practice, lots of repetition. A lot of education research is showing, or like research about learning, is showing that spaced repetition is really important for memory. And spaced repetition means, let's say you learn today in class how to add fractions. So you did it in class. Later that same day, you go home and you do more problems where you're practicing adding fractions so that you remember it for the short term. And then tomorrow, you do one more practice problem where you add fractions. If you do it and you're successful and you get the right answer, then you wait a week, and next week you go and you try another problem where you add fractions. If you do it successfully, then you can, wait a few weeks before you do it again. If you're not successful, then you need to try it again the next day. So again, repetition is a huge part of anything really. Like, again, let's go back to like tennis. If you were trying to learn how to play tennis or any sport, you would be doing drills, right? You would be doing drills where you repeat the same motions over and over again in order to get good at it. Same thing with anything really. In order to get good at adding fractions, you just need to add a lot of fractions. You need to add them until you can remember the process. Now that's my like general advice for most people. Of course, you can like talk about different strategies for memorization all night, so I'll stop there. But definitely watch that video that I've already posted, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video where I talk about more strategies in depth. All right, final question here. It says, besides studying my notes, what can I do to be completely prepared for the math test? All right, so this is, right, this goes back to what I've already talked about. The best way to study math is to do math. So besides just like rereading what you've done, you should be actively solving problems. So not just running your eyes over what's on the page, but you should put a problem in front of your face, get out your pencil and paper and try to solve it. And you work on it until you can figure it out. If you can't figure it out, you ask me questions and we work on it until you've got it figured out. That's the most important thing for learning math, and it's the most important thing for keeping it in your brain. I know that with math, it feels like there is a lot to learn, but I promise that each of you can do it, and I am absolutely here to help you. So I'm going to wrap it up there for tonight. Thank you all to everyone who posted questions last week. I was really happy to see all of those questions there. And I will be continuing with the study skills videos on most Thursdays, so make sure you are watching those, and maybe I'll do another question and answer again in the future. All right, everybody, thanks for joining me here, and take care.